Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation. It's good to see your smiling faces. As we begin, I want to ask folks who have children in their homes, if you would like, and if the kids are willing, to bring them near the computer. We're going to do the Time for All Ages at the beginning of the service to make sure that our kids are included. And so bring them near if they would like. Just a few quick announcements before that. First of all, thank you for the notes and messages regarding my departure. I just so deeply appreciate all the conversations and expressions of kindness. Thank you so very much. I also want to let you know that the interim minister committee has begun meeting, the minister search committee rather, has begun meeting to search for an interim minister. And they'll be sharing updates in the coming days and weeks, so keep an eye out for that. Finally, as always, today we'll have breakout rooms after the service where you can meet with folks, socialize in groups of about 7, 8, 9 people, something like that. And today, we always have a focus question. Today the question is, tell a story about a time when you got into good trouble, or talk about good trouble that you have witnessed. So we'll break out after the service and talk about that question. And now Marcie is going to provide our Time for All Ages in a brand new slot.
Good morning. I'm Marcie Boden. I'm the Director of Faith Formation here at Valley UU. We decided to move the Time for All Ages to this spot to make it easier for families to know when the story would begin. So hopefully the kids will be able to make it there and sit down and hear the story. Of course, we encourage everyone to stay for the rest of the service, but we understand if that doesn't always happen for some, especially wiggly people, young or old. So the story I want to share with you today is The Anti-Racist Baby by Ibram X. Kendi. And I hope that we all will think about how not only we are raising anti-racist children, but also raising anti-racist selves, even though it's a book about a baby. So it starts with, the anti-racist baby is bred, not born. There we go. Anti-racist baby is raised to make society transform. Babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There's no neutrality. Take these 9 steps to make equality a reality. 1, open your eyes to all skin colors. Anti-racist baby learns all the colors, not because race is true. If you claim to be colorblind, you deny what's right in front of you. 2, use your words to talk about race. No one sees racism if we only stay silent. If we don't name racism, it won't stop being so violent. 3, point at policies as the problem, not people. Some people get more while others get less because policies don't always grant equal access. 4, shout, there's nothing wrong with people. Even though all races are not treated the same, we are all human, anti-racist baby can proclaim. 5, celebrate all of our differences. Anti-racist baby doesn't see certain groups as better or worse. Anti-racist baby loves a world that's truly diverse. 6, knock down the stack of cultural blocks. Anti-racist baby appreciates how groups speak, dance, and create as they choose. Anti-racist baby welcomes all groups voicing their unique views. 7, confess when being racist. Nothing disrupts racism more than when we confess the racist ideas that we sometimes express. 8, grow to be an anti-racist. Anti-racist baby is always learning, changing, and growing. Anti-racist baby stays curious about all people and isn't all-knowing. 9, we believe we shall overcome racism. Anti-racist baby is filled with the power to transcend, my friend, and doesn't judge a book by its cover, but reads until the end. I'll put the title and the author up in the chat for you if you're interested in having the book yourself.
Well, thank you, Marcie, and thanks to Ibram Kendi. Ibram Kendi also has a book for grown-ups that's called How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I think it fits so well with Unitarian Universalist philosophy and theology in a way that is exciting to me. So you might pick up both of those books. Well, as we begin our service this morning, I want to offer a reading. It was written by Reverend George Kimmich Beach a long time ago. He wrote, "Everything begins on the verge of awareness. The dawn is not, and then is. Sleep is not, and then is. In between is the awakening. The passage of thin light between breaks open the day. The passage of thin sound between flows into the day. Too soon the numbing rumble of traffic swells, the day glares, but let the soft haze hang again across the row of morning. Wait upon the narrow moment, the first awareness of being in between. Live days and seasons on the thin edge of dawn, in praise that every single thing begins now. Come, let us worship together." If you have a candle or a chalice that you're planning to light this morning, please draw that near as we read in unison these words. "We kindle this flame, symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of love which calls us to work for justice."
Good morning and welcome to VVUU, Virtual Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I'm happy you're here this morning. If you're new to us, I hope you'll stay for the breakout sessions after the service. It'll be an opportunity to talk with some of our members in a smaller group setting. And since this is the way we see each other these days, new or not, I hope you'll consider turning on your camera if you have one. My son always likes to sit outside of the camera so no one can see him in his pajamas. But if you have on pajamas this morning, it's okay. It's just nice to see everyone. I'm Melanie Clunan-Schulte, your worship associate this morning. And it occurred to me earlier this week that this will be the last time I'm worship associate with Reverend Andy in the pulpit. I couldn't help but reflect on the past 8 years and the fact that our congregation has been changed in some really important ways, I think. We UUs have always said justice is our calling. But Reverend Andy challenged us, James Luther Adams-like, to look at it as more than just a calling, to look at it as a moral imperative, and to see that our work is in community with each other and with others of faith, as he put it. As someone with no supernatural beliefs, I always balked a bit at that word faith, but Reverend Andy called on us to look past the semantics, to see that we have much in common with other liberal religions, and that to have relevance in the wider world, we need to be at the table with them. He challenged us too to question our own assumptions about the world, to not just smugly point out others' prejudices, but to take a look at our own. Together with some of our members that put together Beloved Conversations and other programs, he has shined an unwavering spotlight on race, on socioeconomic status, and on the question of whether we're really as welcoming as we like to believe ourselves to be. He called us to learn more about our UU tradition, with sermons on Paul Best and Emma Eliza Bailey, among others. And all of this was served up with a heaping dose of wit and a whole lot of humor. Reverend Andy told us about how, as a child who was old enough to read, but not old enough to read cursive, he thought a plaque in his house that said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," said, "As for me and my horse, we will save the land." That got a good laugh, but I also think it was an apt metaphor for his time with us. Like an idealist cowboy, Reverend Andy tried to lead us, at times a stubborn horse, toward his vision of VUU in the wider world. And now we're nearing the end of that ride. And I can't say I love the timing. I don't think I'm alone in that. But if I'm honest with myself, I have to admit that there's probably no time for Reverend Andy leaving that I would have been happy with. And so, Reverend Andy, I hope that you will keep your promise to keep tabs on us from afar. I hope you'll return now and again to preach a sermon, and I hope you'll monitor our progress as a congregation. We won't be hard to find. We'll recognize each other out there. We'll be the ones saving the land. And now, let us sing together.
Please join us in singing Now Let Us Sing. This song has two parts. We're going to be singing both parts in harmony. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Sing, now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Sing, lift up your voice.
Lift up your voice.
Be not afraid.
Be not afraid.
Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the hope within.
Sing, now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the hope within.
Sing, lift up your voice.
Lift up your voice.
Be not afraid.
Be not afraid.
Now let us sing to the power of the hope within. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the love within.
Sing, now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the love within.
Sing, lift up your voice.
Lift up your voice.
Be not afraid.
Be not afraid.
Now let us sing to the power of the love within. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the joy within.
Sing, now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the joy within.
Sing, lift up your voice.
Lift up your voice.
Be not afraid.
Be not afraid.
Now let us sing to the power of the joy within.
Well, thank you, Andrew and Katie. And it was fun to watch you all sing. So I'm so glad that you all sang in your homes. One day you'll do that again together in person, and maybe it won't be too far away. Well, as you all know, the mission of this congregation, love, service, and justice in our communities, goes on even in a time of pandemic. And you all have made that happen. You gathered signatures for Invest in Edge. You've done a Black Lives Matter, 2 different Black Lives Matter car parades, and a third one is coming up, and you're writing your representatives. I know that the work of justice, the work of love, you care for one another, offer each other pastoral care when you're feeling ill. It's inspiring to watch you carry out the mission of this congregation even now. So and of course your donations go to fund that mission. There are a couple ways to give here on the screen. You can text your donation or you can mail a check to our office. Either way is just as effective. Thank you so much for all you do to support the mission of this congregation, not just with your finances, but also with the work of your hands and your hearts. Thank you for your generosity. Well, we're going to move into a time of the service now that focuses on centering, calming, on prayer and meditation. So I would invite you to find a comfortable spot wherever you're sitting or standing. Be aware that you are contacting the floor beneath you, indirectly the ground that connects all of us together. We'll begin this time of centering by singing "When Will the Fighting Cease?"
Let's take 3 big breaths together, allowing each breath to quiet our minds, relax our bodies, ground our feet or our seat, feeling the strength of the floor or the chair beneath us, and opening our hearts. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. One more. Breathe in and out. Please join me in singing this song and holding this prayer. When will the fighting cease? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries? When will the fighting cease? When will we live in peace? When our love breaks boundaries?
Would invite you to, if you have a joy or concern, to post that in the chat as we move into a time of prayer, and would invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer. Truly we pray, let our love break boundaries. Of course, as human beings, our love is always embodied. We do nothing without our bodies, and the work of our hands is so important. This morning, I want to invite you to reflect on those hands with Reverend Christine Robinson's meditation on hands. And maybe you could just soften your gaze and glance at your hands as I guide us through this meditation. I invite you into a space of quiet and peace, to ground yourself by noticing your contact with chair and floor, by sitting straight, by becoming aware of your breathing. Look at your hands. They've been through a lot, those hands. They have strengths, scars, beauty. I invite you to remember that it is your hands that do the work of love in the world. These hands may hold another's hands. These hands may type emails to politicians, sign cards of consolation and congratulation. These hands may patiently teach, quilt works of beauty, or write words urging peace. These hands may bathe children, feed elders, nurse the ill, work the earth, organize communities. These hands may clasp in prayer, may open in release, may grasp in solidarity, or may clench in righteous anger. These hands are your hands, God's hands, our hands, a great mystery of flesh and intention, a great potential of embodied love. May we use them for good purpose. Amen.
I don't want to have feet of stone. I don't want to have feet of stone. I want to follow this river of life where it will have me go. I don't want to have feet of stone. I don't want to have a dagger tongue. I don't want to have a dagger tongue. I don't want my words to be a weapon, but a healing balm. I don't want to have a dagger tongue. I don't want to have a heavy mind. I don't want to have a heavy mind. I don't want to hold these thoughts that are chains of iron. I don't want to have a heavy mind. I want to have eyes of love. I want to have eyes of love. Count the beggar man's life precious as my own. Offer my back for my brother's load. I want to have eyes of love. I want to have eyes of love.
My goodness. Well, thank you, Katie and Noel, and thank you, Izzy, for putting that together. What a beautiful, beautiful piece of music that was. Well, We lost a true hero this week in Congressman John Lewis. His life was a life spent in the heat of the battle for racial justice and voting rights specifically. His resume is almost too much to believe. He helped organize the 1963 March on Washington. He led the Selma Montgomery marches across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where he suffered a skull fracture in a beating issued by police officers on Bloody Sunday. He and his colleagues were spat on, roughed up, and thrown in jail. Lewis alone was jailed dozens of times. He was called a troublemaker, reviled for so often getting into what he called good trouble, trouble that changes policy, changes the country and the world. Time has a way of shifting public opinion of people like Lewis. I figure people feel less threatened as the years go on, as the protests are further from the present. Over time, Lewis went from being seen largely as a rabble-rouser to a national treasure. One of my favorite stories about Lewis demonstrates why that might be. Not so long ago, Lewis worked with a comic book artist to put out an amazing series of graphic novels about his life's work that's called March. Knowing that he was nearing the end of his life a few years ago, he wanted to share his story to inspire the generations that came after him. As part of the promotion tour, he attended a comic convention in San Diego. He was to speak to a packed room about his newly released series of books, but he wanted to fit in with the crowd. What could he do? Well, his much younger co-author suggested people here do cosplay, essentially dressing up in costume as their favorite comic book heroes. So he said, why don't you do that? So Congressman John Lewis cosplayed as his younger self. He put on a jacket and a backpack, just like he wore in the Selma marches. He placed in the backpack 2 books, an orange, a toothbrush, and toothpaste, just like he did in 1965. And when he was finished speaking to the gathered room full of comic fans, he grabbed the hands of 2 children in the room and led the attendees on a march through the halls of the convention center. Now, those children were students in Mick Rabin's 3rd grade class at Oak Park Elementary School in San Diego. They were using the comic books to learn about the civil rights movement. The whole class attended the speech, and Lewis wanted to lead them on their own march as part of their learning. At first, only the people in the room with Lewis followed him. But soon word got out, and at least 1,000 people, mostly teenagers and young adults, were marching with the congressman around the San Diego Convention Center. From a New York Times story about the incident, quote, his goal that day in 2015 was to help the children understand that you don't need superpowers to be a hero, Lewis's co-author John Aden said. He was trying to show them how his faith and his belief in America fundamentally put him in a position where they would look at him as a hero. The congressman said that it was, quote, another children's march, just like they called it in Alabama, end quote. In the pages of these books, which I have read and reread and cannot recommend highly enough, by the way, those children saw illustrations of Congressman Lewis being beaten and thrown in jail for the cause of racial justice. They didn't get the whitewashed history lesson on civil rights that many of us did. Maybe someday they will be found changing the world by getting into good trouble. If we can pull that image down now, Izzy, I appreciate it. And that brings me to this morning, this last Sunday of the month in which our theme is harmony. And I want to talk about the times when calls for kindness and harmony are oppressive, are counter to the cause of justice, something that John Lewis knew plenty about. Sometimes harmony is the enemy of justice. In a way, this is demonstrated by the social battle over wearing masks. I've been bad lately about getting into Facebook dust-ups. I'm sorry if you're an anti-masker, but I can't see that position as anything but dangerous. Recently, someone I admire posted something about respecting everyone's decision either to wear a mask or not wear a mask when they're in public, that we should just be nice to each other. And I had had all I could take. I said that I was all for being nice to people, but in a pandemic, when we're inside, close to each other, we can't just make health a matter of private opinion. At the time, my daughter worked at a Starbucks kiosk in a grocery store, and people there weren't asked to wear masks. Some came to the counter and coughed without covering their mouths and without wearing a mask. So if I found out that someone gave my child COVID because they didn't wear a mask, I assured my friend that my reaction would be anything but nice. You may not be surprised that my little tirade wasn't all that productive, and I'm trying to be less of a social media crusader. But generally, I'm convinced that sometimes when people call for being nice to each other regarding difficult societal issues, what they really want is peace without sacrifice, the status quo, to maintain their privilege and comfort without having to take any action that is not easy for them, to stay comfortable when discomfort is called for, to squash public debate and the messy process of democracy in favor of peace and quiet. Certainly the same kinds of calls can be heard in regards to the protests for racial justice. Some would like them simply to go away, or for all the protesters to pray and sing, but not to make demands or disrupt traffic. This is not new. Heather Ann Thompson, who's professor of history and Afro-American and African studies at the University of Michigan, was asked a few weeks ago how the current protests compare to the protests in the 60s, which now have almost legendary status in our society. And she said, quote, "Not only is the wanton murder of Black men by racist whites similar to what's happened before in history, but is today's collective uprising. It's a mix of protest in terms of carrying signs and slogans, but also rage and tears and lashing out. And like in the 1960s, there has been some looting because the glaring injustice of racial inequality is time and again accompanied by the injustice of economic inequality. That's why in these moments, people also lash out at the rich and property. So in that sense, she said, we've been here before," end quote. And just like in the 1960s, those who, like me, have experienced white privilege in our lives, look at these protests, especially the destruction of property, and some of us are, let's face it, afraid. That, I think, is behind some of the calls for the protests to be more peaceful. The status quo, which has so benefited people like me, is under threat, and this frightening moment of the combination of climate change, COVID, and racial injustice feels as if it might tear the nation, maybe the world, apart. When I need to call on my courage, when I'm tempted to center the destruction of property rather than the deaths of Black Americans at the hands of police, I look to the examples of people like Michelle Brown, the owner of Teaism, a restaurant near the White House. Her shop was set on fire during the uprisings in DC in May. She was awakened in the middle of the night by a call from the fire department, and she bolted to her car in her pajamas to head over and see the damage. But before she even started the car, she tweeted this: "Before anyone puts a single word in our mouths, Black lives matter." The restaurant was destroyed. She lost artwork. She lost a prized tea chest. But in an interview the day after, she said this, quote, "It doesn't matter how I feel. It's not about me. There are 100,000 people dead. This guy had a policeman sit on his neck for 9 minutes. These are horrible things that are happening that we're going through in this country. So for me, whatever it is that we have to cope with, I feel blessed and lucky every day. And to her customers, she wrote this: "It was heartbreaking, but this moment is not about us." End quote. It's complicated, no doubt about that. And we need not shame ourselves for feeling whatever we feel. But I think all of us can access the kind of courage and willing sacrifice that that business owner, Michelle Brown, found. When we're tempted to center our fears, or when we're tempted to focus on property damage rather than the loss of Black lives, what can we do? What can we do about the very real anxiety that we feel? Well, first, I think we can work to get more comfortable with our discomfort. Now, I want to acknowledge that that's not natural, and our brains do not want us to do that. It's nobody's fault that we've evolved to eliminate discomfort as soon as we possibly can. But one of the messages from every religious tradition is that if we can find a way to stay calm and centered through discomfort, more productive solutions and better ways of being can emerge. It seems to me Eastern religions do this work most effectively. They prescribe meditation, times of simply sitting, maybe focusing on a word or phrase if you must, as a way of taming the mind that will not be quiet. In meditation, we might well remember our limited place in the universe. We might recall that we can do hard things and that our values require us to do things that seem opposed to our instincts. But it isn't just Buddhism and Taoism, it's the monotheist religions too. In the Hebrew Bible, the prophets are sometimes found going off alone to speak with God, to pray in particularly difficult times. And Jesus is reported to have once said, "Consider the lilies, who don't even have jobs. Yet King Solomon in all his glory wasn't clothed as beautifully as one of them." And in another place, "Don't worry about the future. Who by worrying about their height can add 1 inch to their stature?" That kind of acceptance ain't natural. I think sometimes I worry about something as a way of having control over a difficult situation. But when prophets from every major religion are pointing me in a different direction, I think I, as a Unitarian Universalist, need to pay attention. Science, too, supports taking time away to meditate, as it can activate deep breaths, and focused intention can activate the newer parts of the human brain evolutionarily, the parts that can help us make choices that aren't instinctual and are more carefully considered, and bypass the ancient lizard brain that sees everything as life or death and wants to react immediately. Slowing down our minds is maybe the most effective way to get curious about other people's experiences. And wow, what a difference curiosity makes. Fear might tell me that I need to calm things down as quickly as possible. That's natural. In some ways, it's what we've evolved to do: evaluate threats, assign people and ideas as either dangerous or acceptable, react quickly, get back to the status quo. But we aren't running from tigers anymore, unless we've done something stupid at the zoo. And so our brains often lie to us about the degree of danger from people and ideas and protests. Our brains sometimes read those things as just as dangerous as an attacking animal. Once we've slowed that reaction down, and I think we have to do it over and over and over, we can be curious. We can be curious about ourselves and our own reactions rather than condemning ourselves. And we can be curious about other people and their reactions rather than condemning them. And curiosity can break down barriers. Friends, we are living in scary times. No doubt about that. It's going to take daily work, some calming practice perhaps like meditation, to keep from being guided by our anxiety and fear. But fear will keep us from heeding the advice of John Lewis to get into good trouble. Because good trouble doesn't make for immediate peace. It's difficult. It's sometimes painful, but it changes things. Good trouble can land you in jail, though. It can cause pain before it brings about healing. But let us keep on and keep on and keep on getting into that kind of trouble and doing the work to make it possible to support others who are doing the same. May it be so. Amen.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
And now if you will grab those chalices again, and as you extinguish it, read with me the words by which we extinguish our chalice. Though we extinguish the chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May its light guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again.
And now, friends, may life bless you and keep you. May the Spirit make its face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. May the universe pour out the fullness of its blessings on you and bring you peace. Go in peace to serve love and to serve one another. We're going to give folks a moment to log out if they would like, and then we'll move into breakout groups here in just a couple of moments. Hope you'll be able to stay around and participate. And the question that we'll be considering in our breakout groups will be typed into the chat in just a moment.